first question I have here, or topic I want to discuss is self-development before seeking to enter a long-term relationship, right? And I want to start with you, Dr. Dodge. Why is it so important to understand oneself and address personal traumas before looking to enter a long-term relationship?
I talked about that in my session for those who were here. Yeah, it's just essential. I think you answered the question in asking the question. So yeah, absolutely. If you don't heal your own wounds, if you don't learn how to bind them, if you don't, first of all, before you get that, you have to know yourself first. I spoke a lot about that. You have to know who you are, where you stand, where, the boundaries between where you begin and the other person ends. Because if you don't work on yourself, you will drag all of that trauma and drama and baggage into that relationship or situationship. It's inevitable. So absolutely, you have to work on yourself first. And I talked about it being such a challenge. There's a lot of inner work that needs to be done, and oftentimes what we do is we run from it. And I invited people this morning to sit with yourself and to sit still and to get to know yourself, and acknowledging that when you sit still is when the demons show up. When everything you've been hiding and running from and repressing and suppressing all of your life, it comes to the surface, and what you want to do is run. But you must stand, you must stay, because you're worthy of it. You are worth knowing yourself, and you're worth healing, so that you can bring your whole self to the relationship. I also mentioned that comfort and growth cannot coexist. It's impossible. So you're going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be hard. I'm not going to tell you it's an easy process, but you are worth it. You are worth it. So in order for you to connect with a brother or a sister, you have to first have a relationship with yourself and be okay with that. Love who you are, all of your limitations, and your beauty as well.
And before we get to you, Lawrence, I want to ask the Ross, right? That's the Kejazmatch Kwasi. I want to you suggest men identify and focus on their purpose before looking to enter a long-term relationship. Could you elaborate on that one, please?
Yes. First and foremost, let me greet you all in that divine name of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie I, and His chosen Queen Empress was Zero Menen. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to discipline myself and keep within the time restraints. But in terms of purpose, one of the things that I have been instructing young brethren who come is that everything starts with purpose, and how I define purpose is that purpose is attached to service. First of all, ask yourself, who do you serve? You have to be a higher power. We go into the seek ye first, the kingdom of the Almighty, and all things shall be added. So, as a brethren, and I'm talking to the brothers now, we have been called to lead our families. How can you lead if you are not grounded, if you're not connected to source, if you're not connected to the Most High, however you may manifest that journey? That is your number one focus goal in your early 20s, and even before that. But when you're looking to enter into relationship and build a marriage, to build your kingdom as a king, look for that queen. It starts with purpose, and I have something I call purpose over pum pum. Excuse my French. Okay? Why do I say that? Because when you're a young man, you will roam the streets at night looking for this elusive pum pum that you have been called biologically to connect with. And this becomes the main focus of most young men's pursuit. You're at the club, you're not looking for a lady, you're thinking about the feeling that pum pum is going to give you, right? So we just have to do it from a thing to say that if you have a purpose, and if you're connected to that service to the Most High, you are going to now have a better metric on which to vet, because some pum pum is not good for you, right? Let me cut it right there, because I can go deep enough. But I want to stay disciplined.
All right. not a hand, right? That's not a hand.
Of course.
I wanted to ask, in regards to the development of self before we get into a long-term relationship, could you touch on that too, please?
Yeah, definitely will. Good afternoon, family. We in Philly. Good afternoon, family. It is a great honor to be here, and I'm thankful to be amongst these amazing leaders. I've traveled the world. I've counseled and married nearly 200 couples. I have stewarded a community of 50,000 young adults who break bread every other month around the world. This question of purpose rings no matter what part of the world that you're in. But I think the purpose is the final. Purpose is the reason a thing exists, the why behind what you're doing. But typically in the West, when you talk about purpose, it's tied to career. What that already establishes is that purpose is separate and distinct from your relationship and your family. So that you hear people say, I got married and I lost my purpose. As though your marriage, your relationship, you as a husband, you as a wife, you as a mother, you as a father, has nothing to do with your purpose. And so I think two of the things that I think about when it comes to purpose and establishing your purpose is understand the reason you exist and then the purpose of marriage. And if you ask, how many people in this room are married? Can you make some noise? That's the cricket ministry out there. Got a high 5.5. But here's a bigger question. How many brothers and sisters are pursuing marriage? Make some noise. About 37%. Right. Your purpose, I'm a minister of the gospel. My purpose is to glorify God. And so I recognize that my purpose is to serve and to serve all of humanity. The purpose of marriage, you're going to get multiple different answers. And what marriage is not relationship graduation. It's not boyfriend-girlfriend graduation. It's not social media validation. I can put these white bridal photos out. People know that I made it. Or third, it is not your deliverance to become happy. Marriage is not meant to make you happy, it's meant to make you holy. That you would be set apart to become the person that God has designed you to become, and set apart to do all the things that He's called you to do, that you would look more like Him. If that is the case, number one, marriage will end because people stop being happy. So again, when it comes to this purpose, I try to be very careful, I'll close here, around this notion of purpose. I think it is important for a man to understand the end and the purpose of marriage and what his goal is in that marriage and be able to articulate what his goal is in that marriage. But if the idea is that I have my whole life together before I get married, part of the reason why there's so many single sisters, and I'll speak from this standpoint, is part of it is because our brothers believe that we need to have everything in order before we find them. So the longer that you continue to believe that delusion, the longer they're uncovered, the longer they're out there, the longer the heartbreak. And so this idea that you have to have yourself together, I am 40 years old, I went to Harvard, I went to Stanford, I went to Texas, I went to all the greatest places, made all the money in the world, all that stuff. I have not met a man at 40, 42, 43 who felt content with where he's at. And so I think this notion is that you're clear on the purpose of marriage. You've heard whether God has even allowed you or He's prescribed that you should marry this woman. And then if that's the case, God has equipped you to be the husband that He's called you to be. And so I think we have to understand what the purpose of us is and the purpose of marriage is. And ultimately, don't believe that you have to have everything in order for you to pursue a woman and build with her for the glory of God.
Serious thing. And could everyone in here raise your hand if you know what a red flag is, so we don't have to define it? Everyone in here knows what a red flag is, right? I just want to make sure if who's listening. So
I'm not the
we're gonna talk about red flags, right? Dr. Dot, I just want to ask first one here. What are some of the red flags we should be looking for during the early stages of the courtship to prevent future conflicts and heartache?
How much time do we have?
I don't know, so you got it. That's very.
Yeah. One of the biggest red flags for me in my practice in life is when people say, you know, we are just alike. I think that can be a huge red flag, because if two people in a relationship are the same, then one is unnecessary. For relationships to grow,
Y'all gonna pull up that one.
You gotta let that breathe.
you said I don't have a lot of time.
Man, pull up.
See that one again?
If two people in a relationship are the same, then one is unnecessary. In order for growth to happen, there needs to be balance. There needs to be, my husband and I are polar opposites, and you would think theoretically that would not work, but opposites really do attract. The things that I am limited in, my husband is here, and it's like, so we help each other to grow that way. If you're looking for someone to match you and to be like you, no, you don't need someone to be like you. First of all, you're gonna butt heads a lot, because you're gonna want this, you know, it's not, but it's fantasy land. And I think I will just appeal to women, just on the line of with what you said about not having everything together. A lot of women that I work with and talk to are looking for that perfect mate that it doesn't exist. We have to accept people first for who they are, because every one of us is on the path. None of us has it all the way together. We have this laundry list of he must make this amount of money, he must do this and that. Stop it. Look for his character. Men, look for a woman's character. What is her level of integrity? Is she a ride or die? Does she have my back? Right? Because I say all the time, these are going to drop. All the stuff that you put on, it's going to fade away. And when all that fades and fails, when you're sick, who had you? Who holds you down? This is all pretty and everything, but it's all going to go away. My husband is there for me, regardless. You know, I'm there for him regardless. So stop looking for the superficial things. My husband's one, I think, the most ignorant question I've ever been asked in my life. I'm a psychologist, a clinical social worker, whatever. My husband was in construction. He started as a laborer and he worked his way up to a foreman. They were like, why did you marry a professional man? That was the most ignorant thing I've ever heard in my life. Oh, that man has me. For things that he's not strong in, I'm strong in. So it doesn't matter. Stop looking for, he's a doctor, he's a lawyer, he's an Indian. Stop it. You'll be alone for a long time and you're going to marry for the wrong reasons. I'm looking at that man long term. And when I wasn't working, he had me. When he was, it's like we got to help each other. You got to be helpmeets, as the word says. Stop looking for things that don't matter, because they don't.
And Adjah, Adjah, for another red flag I'm going to ask you about, right? Incompatible life goals. I see this a lot with, like, especially if the people have two different religious beliefs. It seems like an issue in the house, you know? So how important is it to have compatible life goals?
It's essential, and I think this is where we go wrong. As a man, we are called to bring vision. The woman is there to help you manifest, to give birth to that vision as that helpmate. And this is why we start with self and knowing that I'm a servant of the Almighty. When we talk about purpose, what are we talking about? What are my unique talents and skills that I can employ that's going to make the world a better place and that I can provide service? And that when I'm doing it, the time passes and I'm not even aware of time. I'm so involved into what, that's your purpose right there. You want to be in that zone. Once you find that zone, you monetize. Once you monetize and you can create income streams from that, and you may have to do other things on the side to sustain yourself while you're pursuing purpose. That's another key. But while you're doing that, now you're looking for that helpmate that's going to help you to execute that purpose as a man. As a woman, you're looking for a man that has that vision, who's on that journey, and he has receipts. He can produce receipts that he's not just in dreamland talking about this fantasy, but he's actually actively pursuing. This is what you're looking for as a female. As a man, you are looking for someone that's going to add value to your purpose, that's going to help you along your path. I'll give you a quick story. Before I was married, and my wife is here, because I'm Rastafari, I knew I was going to return to Africa to live. I bought her a plane ticket and we went on a trip to Africa. I didn't tell her at the time, but if she had said that she didn't like Africa, that would have been it. You know what I mean? She would not have made the cut, even though I love her. I love her, you know. But you have to know where you're headed, and it has to be that cold and calculated sometime, because when you try to kick the can down the road, it's going to create that division. We grow apart. And she is more passionate about some of these things than I am now, you know. So these are the things as a man you really have to be clear on your purpose, where you're going, and you want to find someone that's going to add value, so that when you don't like each other, because there will come times in your marriage you don't like each other, you know what I mean? But it's that higher purpose that's going to keep you on that path, that's going to keep that fire burning. And this is so important, because a lot of time this romance is a lie. And it's a modern invention from the 17th century. You know, and it just came into force. Marriage is not about romance. Marriage is the central way that wealth, heritage, identity, legacy is passed from generation to generation. Your family is the first government. You are a king. I don't deal with a partnership. My relationship is not a partnership. I'm a king and I seek a queen. No disrespect to the partners out there. You're dealing with your partnership. You know, tell me how it goes down the line. But I'm a king. We govern. You know what I mean? And we hold ground. As a man, that should be your aim and objective. And you find a queen that's going to enhance your kingdom.
Serious. I want to touch on one more aspect. I want to ask Brother Lawrence this, right? So you see the red flags, right? But this idea that you're going to change the person from these behaviors. How does that go?
Could you play that back so they can get that comfortable?
You see behaviors that aren't conducive for long-term relationships. It's very consistent, and it's just a part of the characteristic. Or for whatever reason, you feel that you will be able to change that in that particular person. How does that usually work out?
It doesn't work out too well if you do that. But I'm going to frame it with a foundation I think will help people, because I know that there's people from different faiths, different belief systems. But there's a scripture in the book of Judges, and scripture talks about in the land there was no king. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. In your process of even selecting, there should be at least a foundation that you're approaching your marriage or your relationship with. Did God ordain this? If there's no dominion over, did he either prescribe it or did he allow it? Guaranteed he either allowed it for you to choose it. And the reason why I say this is because even the scripture I don't want us to identify whether or not the person we're with is right or wrong based on the trouble. Because we've seen in scripture, he's like, marry a prostitute. God has called people to marry people that would be troubled. He called Jesus to marry the church that would hang him. And marriage is a picture of the relationship between God and his people. It's a story, it's a reenactment of a play. And so I think number one, you have to just get clear in your mind with this relationship. God, I believe in my best of faith that this was my wife. Then now when I'm dealing with something that may be very, very difficult, I have some sober mind around it. To say either you're going to transform me through this difficulty, because we don't have a theology of suffering, which is why we all look for comfort, which is why we run from relationships. And so I think that's really important. I think, too, you can't change nobody. And you have to get to this point where I'm like, I've accepted this person in terms of who they are. And your ability to accept will be your ability to accept is dependent upon your ability to accept the difficulties and red flags in you. Typically, the people who are most sober-minded and make choices have a clear, or they're self-aware enough to understand that I am a red flag for even the person that I care for. I present things that is going to make that person go to the cross. The idea is the trouble of having a traumatized people is that sometimes you could be in a mindset that I am the victim and everybody else is out to get me. Everybody else is a risk. I present no risk. The reality is that here's the dark thing about when people are traumatized. The victim becomes the victimizer. So, for example, even if I look at this conversation about red flags, and I'm just like, all those people out there, all those people are risk, all those people hurt people, all those people cheat, all those people disrespect, and I am just here, just need to be protected, then you're not as compassionate when you're dealing with somebody who has traits that you need to bear with. Because you don't recognize that the other person on the other side is bearing. In marriage, I have so many marriage counselors. I love doing premarital. I don't like marriage. The reason why is because they've already gotten set in their ways, and you have to break a lot of things. But one of the biggest things I find, and sisters, you'll understand this, if, for example, a sister brings her husband to marriage counseling, it's happened twice in my career, on over hundreds of couples. Twice in my career, when I started to lean in and also correct that sister, they end the sessions. I came here for you to fix him. I came here for you to point out how he's doing, he's not listening, he's that, but I'm also seeing how she's hurting him. He has no feelings. He should just take it. He should. And so I'm saying this to say, when you look at this question about how do I deal with somebody I know I can't change? Number one, coming with a sober mind to say, well, there are things in me that they would die to change. And so unless I'm getting a clear indication or prompting that either in marriage, either if they abused me physically, if there's been adultery, from a scripture standpoint, then I could bear with this. And so I think that's the concern I have, is that I think we're looking at marriage and looking at relationships, and we're the ones in fear, not thinking, and I think it'll help our generation if we humble ourselves and recognize that if you're in a relationship right now, whether he cries or not, or whether she cries or not, you're hurting your spouse. You hurt your spouse every day without you knowing it. The more you are self-aware about that, the more sober-minded and compassionate you are about things about them that you will never be able to change.
Thank you so much. The last section I'm going to talk about is the honeymoon phase, where it kind of runs its course, right? Anyone can start this particular segment. How important is having effective communication? And what does effective communication look like in a marriage?
You want me to start? All right. I'll kick it off. I want to introduce you to a thing named pillow talk. How many people know what pillow talk is? It is essential for a marriage because you're working all day. When you lie down on that pillow at night, often this is when the download is able to happen. And this is very important for married people to just keep up to date with each other, what's happening. You know what I mean? Sometimes your wife drop asleep during the pillow talk. You may drop asleep. Sometimes the pillow talk escalate, you know what I mean, to some great things happen. You know what I mean? So it's
Pull.
Right. You know what I mean? So the pillow talk is very crucial. And let me put it this way: just you have to find time. And, you know, for each couple, it's going to work differently. But you have to find that time. What my wife and I do as well is walks. We go for walks, exercise. While we're walking, we're downloading, we're reasoning, we're talking about ideas, we're game planning, we're life planning. And we're exercising at the same time we're moving, we're getting fresh air. Sometimes the children come, sometimes they don't. But these are key things in a marriage. And that honeymoon time will end. The oxytocin will subside. How many people know about the oxytocin?
Yes.
All of that love chemical, all of that stuff is going to subside, blessings. All of that will subside. And in Rastafari, we have something called livity, which is a way of life. You have to normalize intimacy, certain things. And for the wives, don't make your husband go too long without a something there. Please. You know what I mean? Because we have to keep it real, you know, as a man of the cloth, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? We have to keep it real because as Africans, we don't demonize sexuality. You know, in Babylon, sexuality became perverse. But when you look in the ancient text, what does it say? It says, be fruitful and multiply. That is a command from the Most High. So we have to normalize that within a union. And a lot of women, and I'll turn it over, a lot of women are waiting for that spark of desire before the intimacy. And that's not how it works all of the time. Sometimes you have to get into the levity and then the desire and that spark. What happens? You know, allow me to tell doctor. You see, so you just have to normalize that intimate. And for a man, we need that intimacy regular. For women, they need that ability to sometimes listen, because sometimes as men, and I had to learn this when your wife is downloading, she don't want a solution for every point. She just wants someone to listen and to feel seen and to feel validated. And as men, it's hard for us because we want to solve. You know, you telling me the thing, you know, we want to give you the solution right there, and that's not what they're needing in that moment. So as a man, we have to be empathetic to know she needs to vent, and this is the time for me to just listen. All right, so.
Your question had to do with communication.
Effective communication.
In a marriage. I think one of the foundations of effective communication is respect. Mutual respect. You may not agree with a person, but at least have that level of respect to be able to empathize. That's also critically important. When I'm communicating, I'm not really thinking about myself. I'm thinking about the other person. I'm not coming up with my own answers while that person's speaking. I'm giving that person my full undivided attention. Yeah, there was something else I had to think of as you were talking about that, but I think the sneeze has got a hold of me. But yeah, listening with empathy, being able to be wrong, not having all the answers all the time. I think that's really huge in marriages, because I'm always thinking that my side is the only way, not looking at my husband's perspective, but just being able to listen with empathy and compassion, and, you know, don't have to be right all the time.
I learned.
I'll give some structured points just because of the time. Even to your point, talking about conversations with your wife. With my wife, I've learned and I've been getting guidance to say, when my wife starts to talk, I ask her, do you need to listen or do you need me to solve? At the front end. And she appreciates that, because there's sometimes she needs me to solve, and I'm a natural problem solver, right? So, you know, I ask her that, it brings her shoulders down. And so she doesn't feel like I have to say the right thing, he's just listening. And then even second to this point around communication, we can't understate this. A critical issue in relationship sustaining is the inability of a husband or a wife to apologize and forgive. Learning how to actually apologize. It's a picture again of the gospel, of confessing and then receiving the grace. Some people, you're so focused on being right, you do wrong. And so a picture I'll share is that for many people, so much of lifelong traumas is because of things that have happened to them. And those people that did that thing to them never apologized. If you could understand the weight of a lack of apology in your own life, how much more should you be sensitive to the lack of apology you're giving your spouse? So I want to offer them. The last two things I think to this point around communication, your life is communication. In the reasoning you and I had, man, we had a great conversation. 3 hours, man. I love this guy, man. And we had a 3-hour conversation, man. I still hear about it every week. And one of the things I talk about is you forget in the scriptures that the Gospels are written accounts of disciples who spent enough time with Jesus to write about it. One of the beauties of marriage and what you communicate is you communicate your life to someone. They are potentially the best autobiographer known to man in your life. No one will know you like your spouse. If brothers and sisters know in there, they bring things out of you that no one else in the world can. The best autobiographer possible in your life is your spouse. And so communication, the idea that I just need to stay here so I could just be able to bear witness, to tell the world long after you're gone, you were here. This is how you were like. At your funeral, I say, this is what they really liked. This is the movies they really liked. That's another motivation, number one, to communicate to each other well. You need to have another story about why you need to listen. Because perhaps, maybe, just maybe, you were put in a position to be the gospel writer to that other person's life and them to you. So I think that's critical. And the last piece I'll talk about, which is marriage is made in the mundane. It's made in the mundane. Too often we may unconsciously look to marriage for our dopamine hits. Example, you may go to pray, and sometimes you pray and you feel like, I felt the Spirit of the Lord over me. Sometimes you go to Sunday service and you have your hand up like that sap, you know what I mean? Like that little gift when he's like, never would have made it. And there's some times when you just get nothing. Your faith is supposed to fill the gap. Like, am I here to get a high, or am I here to connect with God, however he may show up to me? Am I here in this marriage to get a high and it's supposed to keep me happy? If you're single, people spend their entire life trying to be happy. How do you think that a relationship is going to allow you to be happy? They put that in the Bible and make you a trillionaire if you could do that. So there's times when I'm not going to feel it. But that 1 Corinthians 7 even talks about sex. It talks about the duty of sex, of husband and wife. And so I think the reality is this, like, you should not work for the highs, the Sunday services of your marriage. You should work for the Monday through Saturdays of your marriage. It's not the high, it's the mundane is where you really make the magic.
All right, we're gonna open it up for Q&A right now if anyone has a question. Anyone up here?
I'll come back to you. I got you first.